What's up, everybody? Good evening. Again, much later than the typical upload on this channel, and it's not even going to be the last upload of the day. But we got to go ahead and get this stuff out while it's new and while it's cool, because tomorrow we're going to have other players get drilled, and this stuff is going to be forgotten about. Well, not forgotten about, but it's not going to be the new hotness. So let's take a look at some of the defensive tackles in this video. So these would be interior guys, guys who are bigger, guys who are often meant more as players that take up space. Not always, but these are your bigger guys that are expected to play on the inside. Maybe some of them are going to be four eyes in a 3-4 defense, but for the most part, these are the bigger bodies. So the 40 time probably means even less for these guys than it does for the edge rushers. The 10-yard split is still pretty important, although again, I think there are a lot of qualities you look for in a defensive tackle that are beyond just straight line speed. Excuse me. And like we did with edge, we need to understand context matters, especially with something like a 40-yard dash. Like, just as an example, if you take a look at the best performing defensive tackles in the 40-yard dash, you have Ty Robinson, right? Ty Robinson had the best 40-yard dash of any interior lineman. He weighs 288 pounds, so he's not even 290 pounds, right? You got Jared Harrison Hunty of SMU. He had the next best 40-yard dash, 486. He weighs 290. These are smaller 3-tech types. Some of these guys might even end up as 4-eye or 5-techs for all I know. These are not typical defensive tackles. That doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that their speed is kind of expected and to a certain extent required for them to be of high value. Ingram Dawkins of Georgia, he had a really good 40 time, but guess what? He doesn't even weigh 280 pounds. He's 276. So that's a guy who could easily end up playing on the edge. He weighs less than Jordan Birch, who is listed as an edge rusher. And he's 6'5", by the way, so that is a lean dude. I don't know if I see that guy ending up on the inside unless he bulks up significantly. Like that's a hard sell for me with Ingram Dawkins. Similarly, you go down the list. Aeneas Peebles of Virginia Tech. He's a lighter guy, although he's squat, so that obviously helps, but he's only 282. So his 40 time is good, but it's more in line with what you would expect for a player that is playing on the interior despite only weighing 282 pounds. So those guys, you have to take their results in context. On the other hand, you have a guy like Darius Alexandra, who, by the way, I thought he had a great day today, and I want to reiterate what I said earlier. If you really want to dig into the combine, you have to actually watch the drills. A lot of the drills are not quantified by numbers. They're quantified by us watching what is going on with our eyes and seeing how comfortable the player looks in certain situations. So Darius Alexandra was somebody who I thought had a really good day overall. I thought he moved really well. I think he had one bad drill where he slipped. Other than that, it was clean. He was a sub-5 guy, 495, really nice 40 time. It's because he's 305 pounds. This guy's plus 300, and he's running a sub-5 40. So that's something that you can look at and go, hey, that's not just a pretty good result. That's an excellent result in context. Same for Derek Harmon, who weighs even more, 313 pounds. Now, Derek Harmon's going to be gone before we can even consider picking him because I don't think we're going to take him in the first round. He is ultimately a 3-tech, but 495 at 313 pounds is awesome. That is remarkable stuff. It probably secured his position in the middle of the first round. Again, I don't think the Seahawks are going to even consider going that way because he's redundant, but the guy was awesome today. Even a guy like CJ West, who is not a huge name here, 316 pounds, squat. He does have short arms, right? But runs the 495 at 316 pounds. That's got to get your attention in some way, shape, or form. So, as you can see, if you take a look at the list of best 40 times among defensive tackles, the top 4 guys are all guys that are on the lighter side. They're all like sub 290. So it just kind of makes sense when you put it that way, right? It looks great. Like Ty Robinson getting a 483 looks amazing, and it is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but That's kind of his thing. And then you got a player, another guy that I want to shout out here because honestly, I really like the interior defensive lineman in this draft overall. But you got a guy like a Josh Farmer who tested decently well overall. It was okay. He's a little bit slower than you would like for somebody that only weighs 305 pounds, but 35-inch arms for an interior defensive lineman. I'm pretty sure he had the longest arms of anybody who tested today. If not, somebody else out there has some freakish arms. So when I saw this with Joshua Farmer, I got pretty interested. I admit the testing is not stellar, but he is plus 300 pounds, so it's not terrible. And at the end of the day, that arm length may do more for him than straight line speed in the NFL anyway. So that was a guy who caught my attention. Zeke Biggers was not far behind, though. He's legitimately 320 plus. He was only an eighth of an inch behind Farmer. So 34 and 7/8 inch arms. He also has 10 and a quarter inch hands. So that's the biggest hands I've seen so far at this combine. And he actually tested, I believe, a little bit better. Yeah, he jumped better. He had a better 10-yard split. He had almost the same 40-yard dash, slightly slower. So you look at a guy like a Zeke Biggers, and you put the whole picture together, and yeah, he's probably a better athlete, at least, than Joshua Farmer. I do want to give some love to the pure nose tackles, though, and you got to understand, these guys always are going to come up last at the 40-yard dash because they're so big and they don't move that well. Like, you watch a lot of these nose tackles, like Nazir Stackhouse of Georgia. He's just slow. But overall, I do think he tested well, and when you watch the movement drills, like the body control, the shuffles, the change of direction drills, he actually moved fairly well. There were some guys out there today that didn't, like Jordan Phillips was one guy. Every time he had to change direction in one of his drills, he looked like a giraffe. He just, it's not natural to him, and that's okay for what he does. But some of these guys move remarkably well for being so big. And I thought Stackhouse was one of the guys who moved pretty darn well. The arm length is a little concerning if you're going to have him play nose tackle, but he has legitimate nose tackle size. And his testing was roughly what you would expect for a nose tackle in the NFL. So I liked what I saw from him. I actually really liked what I saw from Jamari Caldwell on the movement drills. Now, because you look at the actual numbers, they're very forgettable, although understandable for a guy who is over 330 pounds as Caldwell is. 5'16", 40, 186, 10-yard split. These are all pretty low numbers. But I thought he moved well in space. He actually looked fairly natural, even if he's slow. There was like one drill, it might have been the hoop drill, where you're making the figure eights, where he might have slipped. I think it was that one. Other than that, I thought he actually looked pretty smooth flowing out there, and I did not mind what I saw from him at all. And when you combine that with his legitimate 330-pound size, I still really like Caldwell. He's still one of my late-round sleeper guys. And a little bit of love to Elijah Simmons as well, who I thought moved quite well for a 334-pounder. And his arm length is probably just good enough to evade the worst of the critiques. 32 and 3/4 is okay. He's also very stout because he's only 6'1". It's almost like the Poona Ford thing. So even though his testing numbers were not that good, as you can see, 5'3", 740, there's some stuff that I liked with Simmons too. So that's most of the stuff going on with the interior defensive linemen. I think it's important to remember that as Seahawks fans, we have to understand that mostly we're going to be in the market for the nose tackle. 3-tech is something that we might need a little bit of. We might need like a 4th-round pick or a 5th-round pick or even later. I don't think we're going to invest heavy in a 3-tech because we wouldn't have room for them. What would they do? They would sit on the bench and watch Big Cat and Murphy. So going through the rest of these numbers here, again, it's mostly what you would expect. Like if you go to 10-yard split, you have a bunch of guys that are sub 290 at the top here. But the fact that Darius Alexander and Zeke Biggers are so high up here lets you know that those guys are freak athletes. I keep coming back to Darius Alexander. He may have done too good today and pushed his draft stock up to the point where he's going to go too high for the Seahawks to consider drafting. But he looked great out there. You look at some of these 10-yard splits for a guy like Stackhouse, that's actually good. He had a as good or better 10-yard split than some of the guys who were supposed to be more athletic than him. You jump over to the vert, which most of these guys do not have very good verts because they're bigger. But look at a guy like Zeke Biggers. That's one of the bigger guys that we looked at, no pun intended. And he actually hit 34.5 inches on his vert. Same with CJ West, 33 inches, and he's a bigger guy. He jumped more than Harrison Hunty, who was a sub 290. And yeah, there's Jordan Phillips. I talked about him a little bit earlier. But the broad jump, Ingram Dawkins, Ty Robinson at the top. Again, that's kind of what you would expect because those guys are smaller. And I think that's really most of the stuff to really talk about. Yeah, only a few three techs or a few defensive tackles did the 3-cone. And again, one of the smaller guys got the best time by far. Jordan Phillips, yeah, this was the guy who had real trouble moving in open space, so I'm not surprised his 3-cone was bad. And it's a good group overall. I like this collection of talent. But if I was to say who really stood out for me, Darius Alexander. I thought that for a 300-pounder, he moved great. I like Harmon, but as a Seahawks fan, I'm not that intrigued. Zeke Biggers, very interesting athlete. And I like the nose tackles as well. Stackhouse, Caldwell, Simmons. Even though they didn't all test well, I think the traits are there for them to be good NFL players. So that's what I have for the interior linemen here. Let me know what you guys think. I know this video is going up very late, so if you can't watch it until later, again, regardless, thank you. We're moving on to a new position tomorrow, so we got to get on this stuff. We got to strike while the iron is hot. One more video coming late tonight, very late. And then tomorrow we are moving along to defensive backs and tight ends. See you soon. Go Hawks.